welcome to another edition of the Traction Reaction Podcast. I'm Steve Zautke, and joining me once again, it is Tony DiZinno. Under circumstances, well, not the best of circumstances, is it, Tony?
Really not, Steve. And as much as it's great for you and I to catch up, there's a person that we both love catching up with in the media center when we've had the chance, and sadly, we won't have that opportunity anymore. So the shirt kind of gives it away here. But this feels like a tribute, and I once losing Robin Miller, that news kind of hit like a ton of bricks, and I kind of wanted to reflect and share some thoughts and memories.
It wasn't unexpected. We kind of had a feeling, we just didn't really know the timing of it, and that in this case really doesn't make it better because of his age. He's 71. When you're 20 years old, that's old. When you're 30 years old, that's kind of old. And as you get older and older, you think, 71 isn't really that old, is it? And but he had he was very candid about his battles, his health issues over the last couple of years. And I last saw him in May, and he didn't look the best, but it looked like he might be rebounding. But unfortunately, cancer had other ideas.
Same for me. I hadn't been to the Indy 500 in a few years, and I was able to get back in May. And it was between that and Bob Jenkins at the same time. They had a kind of, Bob won the Robin Miller Award press conference or kind of tribute type thing. It had the feel that you don't want it to be the last time, but you fully understand it could be. So the thing that I'm like really thankful of is the way the IndyCar schedule shook out, that there was the extra August Indy race where Robin was now able to go back. And it really seemed like that was kind of, almost a perfect way to kind of have his finish almost in a way he kind of wanted.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Robin, because I know this would kind of embarrass him a bit, but for me, I knew of Robin Miller, but growing up in Milwaukee, we didn't get the Indianapolis Star. You didn't have the internet like you had now, so I didn't know much about Robin until the about 1993, I believe it's the first time I met him. That would have been at the Milwaukee Mile, and that was, of course, during Nigel Mania. And I was working at the Milwaukee Mile as a videographer, and also helped set up the media centers, which at that time were three basically double wide trailers. Then we had American media in one, and then international media in the other one. There was that much international. Those of us who were around in '93 for Nigel Mania were kind of chuckling at the people getting all excited about Fernando Alonso, although it was impressive. The people that were coming over, and he did have a nice, it did bring some extra character to the Indy 500. It wasn't anywhere near 1993. That was absolute chaos. And that's when I first met Nigel Roebuck, Robin Miller, and Gordon Kirby. And they were hanging out in the international trailer. That was the Fun Media trailer. And for me as a young kid, not really knowing him, just kind of introducing myself, and I would just kind of introduce myself, said hi, if you need anything, let me know, and I would just kind of float around and be a fly on the wall, and I loved it.
It's funny. I was actually supposed to meet Robin in Wisconsin, but it didn't happen, and it wasn't for anything that I did wrong. It was for a Robin writing something controversial type situation, which was not the first time he did that. Obviously, I'd grown up watching the kind of RPM Tonight and Speed Channel, Wind Tunnel type things. That was kind of where it took off. And he had this unique ability where, and it's kind of, in hindsight, this was kind of the forerunner where you were both a series website contributor as well as a journalist. So you were kind of able to straddle both ends of it. And he wrote, I remember, a really kind of scathing Champ Car article for Champ Car's website as Champ Car was kind of nearing its end days. And so we were supposed to meet at Road America. I'd only turned 18. There were people younger than me in the Atlantic race. And so I was barely finally able to, go in the press room for the first time. And he didn't get to go not for any fault of his own, but Champ Car was like, we're going to pull your hard card. We're going to pull your credential because you wrote something about our series that's controversial on our website. And Robin, of course, having the last laugh, writes the merger story the following February.
Sure.
Ultimately, him giving Champ Car the end of their hard cards because they weren't a series anymore. So that was kind of my first meant to meet him. And then when I actually did meet him at that year's Indy 500 in 2008, which was my first one, I felt like, oh my gosh, I was like, the rookie class there too, where here's the guy that's, the AJ, Mario, Bobby Unser of the media center, literally because Bobby Unser is standing right there in the media
Mhm.
center holding court. And I'm just like, am I supposed to be here? Did I pass go? Did I collect $200? And there's Robin saying, hey, how's it going, kid? And I didn't realize kid was what he said for everybody, but it felt like normal to me. So
The other situation for me, and this has never been made public before, but and I
uh-oh.
believe it's 2009. I was at Kentucky Motor Speedway, and they were announcing the 2010 IndyCar schedule. And I hope I got the year right. And it was just a bad situation because once again we were in between promoters.
Oh,
We were
yep.
trying to, we were trying to set up a situation, and it was a situation where the group that was trying to take over was hoping to be on the 2010 schedule to help leverage sponsorship, because I figured if we got on, get on the schedule, and then the sponsors would come, type of situation. It was kind of a bit of a pipe dream, but IndyCar said they kind of knew the situation, they wanted to be there. And it was I was down there as kind of a go between. It was me and somebody else, and I apologize, I don't forget who else it was, but it's two. We were both down there. I was down there for not only Racing Nation but also doing this for the Milwaukee Mile. And I'm there for the announcement for the unveiling of the schedule, and lo and behold, the Milwaukee Mile was not on the schedule. I think it was Terry Angstedt was the
All
head
right.
of Indycar at the time, and
Yeah,
he
yeah.
reneged on our agreement, and we were pissed. I'm getting text messages going back and forth, and I'm working with Fred Nation. Fred Nation, it was kind of our contact at the time at
Mhm.
IndyCar. I'm like, Fred, we had an agreement. What's the deal? He's like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if you knew that or not, but I'm getting pissed off. Finally, I went up to Robin. I said, Robin, I need to talk to you. I pulled him out to the side. I said, this is a situation, and kind of gave him the scoop on what was happening at Milwaukee. And I think you could see my passion and what we're trying to do. And from that time on, he said, Steve is one of those guys, he always wants the mile to succeed, which I do. And we worked very hard on it. It was a bit of pushing a stone uphill for that situation. And from that time on, kind of Robin and I kind of had a little, he treated me a little different from that point.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because literally the next year, and I'm betting Robin probably had a lot to do with this. Randy Bernard was then the next leader. His first year was 2010, and they specifically announced the 2011 schedule at the mile in the
Mhm.
fall of 2010. I remember I was still in college that year, but I remember being out there for the Business Journal covering it because it was something that I could actually say was relevant to that audience. And I'm thinking the mailbag mentions that must have occurred that year. We got to get Milwaukee back on the schedule. Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, for me with Robin, I mean, where he and I kind of met like more than just a one-off type thing was in 2011. And I'd gone to that year's Indy 500. I graduated from school a week earlier. The Dan finish happens, and just getting to go to Racer and move out to California was like, whoa, okay, Racer's hiring this kid, and Robin's, I mean, we essentially think about this. At one point at Racer Mag in 2011, we had Robin for the magazine, Lawrence Foster, who was our editor, David Melcher, and myself. I was essentially QB4 at that point, but it's like, my gosh, I'm QB4 on that depth chart. So it's like, how cool is it that I'm sort of colleagues, but not really? And like, do I fit? And it was this. The more you get to events, the more he's like, okay, you're here, you're part of the fabric, and it was just so cool, that continued as I started going to more races around that time.
Yeah, and people, I've and God bless Robin. He was very accepting of me, especially when it came to the famous Robin Miller lunches. And people always are like, "Oh, wow, you get to go to Robin Miller lunches." Well, it was thanks to a couple of people. The first few times I was with somebody. So first time, and I have to think it was Billy Englehart. Billy Englehart just so happened. Billy was going to Indianapolis, and I was going to Indianapolis. I might have been for the PRI show. We got there a day or two early, and Billy called me and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "I don't know. You want to do lunch?" He goes, "Well, it just so happens I'm going over to Robin Miller's lunch." I said, "I'm in." So that was the first time, and that was pretty cool because I had was able to catch up with Gary Bettenhausen and a few other people I hadn't seen in a while. So it's so cool to see those guys, and Rick Duman and Buddy Urbanski were a couple other ones. Thanks to them, I was able to get to them, and I was kind of accepted after that point. But and that Robin most of the time would pay for those lunches, and you always made sure John Horowitz
Horvitz, yeah.
was had a very very cool column today, and he
Yeah.
mentioned that he would always tip the waitresses, and I'm glad he said that because he would do that. That's one thing, if you've ever had time to go out to a restaurant with Robin, that was one of his things. Always tip the waitresses, and the waitresses that always would do take care of us at Charlie Brown's always were very tipped well, because
I
basically Robin was taking care of it.
I had a couple too. I mean, for me, it was I didn't. The funny thing was I didn't get it to any in Indy because it was always it was long. Probably the two food highlights with Robin were the first year I did the full month of May. Like I did race weekend or qualifying weekend or the GP, but I never did the full month, including all practice days until 2016. And the Long's Donut sessions during like the random Tuesday, Wednesdays where it's just 8 of us in there. I mean, those are the people that's like, okay, you're here on a random Tuesday for practice. You're here. You're having some Long's Donuts. Your cholesterol is going up. Your arteries are going up. You're laughing. You're dancing. You're just all the rest. And then there was a couple times at Barber where we got to go to Rusty's legendary barbecue joint there, and it's not even that it's the best barbecue joint. I mean, it's good, but it's not even my favorite barbecue joint on the Barber trip. But that was like the Robin establishment.
Sure.
It's like you're getting a Robin Rusty run at Barber. Okay, that's pretty freaking cool right there. And he's just I don't know how the windows stayed in that place because the laughing and the howling is so loud from just the stories that are happening at that point.
Yeah, I remember one of the mid 2000s. I was seated just kitty corner, Robin, in the media center at Indy, because for a while I was
Right.
affiliated with the old CompuServe guys, the racing information systems guys, where I'm sitting, and then Robin would be. I could turn over to my left, and there was Robin and the whole gang, and yeah, it was just there was always something going on. It was just people coming in. It's amazing how all you got was able to write out his columns. And
And I don't forget. I forget if it was you or Robin that said like you got to have an Uncle Bobby chat, and it
yeah,
was just like that's again it's like almost that spiritual experience where it's like now let me tell you
yeah,
something, and that's me attempting to do a Robin, attempting to do an Uncle Bobby. But speaking of those two, the Uncle Bobby roast that Robin put together with Steve Shunk, the great Steve Shunk. Really feeling for him. I mean, he's been through a lot this year too. Um, but that was a night that you saw this group of people let loose in. I mean, RP wore blue for the first time. He didn't wear, there wasn't starch. And it's like, okay, this is a funny thing. If you're getting RP out there, I think he might have cursed a few times. And the other really fun story that I had from a personal experience standpoint was at Road America in 2017. And Robin, in the middle, after the end of the practice on Friday, just says, well, we kind of need to roast you. And he just went into this bit about how like we remember you were this shy kid that couldn't get out of his own way and was going to get run over and eaten alive in the paddock, and then now he's learned to cuss a few times, and he's just I was taken aback because I was like, wow, you did not need to do this. Like I'm not worthy of this, and it was just I'll hopefully I can find that video because I think Calvin Fish or somebody recorded it, and it was so special to be treated like I'm just a dude writing words, and I'm kind of a colleague, but kind of not because I'm with you on the TV side, but I'm not with you on the website. So it was weird, but it was awesome.
Yeah, we also had the opportunity. I'm in what's called the North Lake Drive 100-mile-an-hour club. It's been around
Hmm.
for years and years, and we had Robin up there a couple times, and just always a hoot to have him up there as a speaker, and just good times, and the stories. A lot of the stories I had heard before, but it was always interesting, hearing those stories. That I really kind of was able to sit down with him for a little bit, and I had totally forgotten about this until a couple weeks ago. In 2003, we had an opportunity to go to it was an Art Pollard tribute that was put on by his family with Robin's blessing, and Robin was the speaker. And at the time, it's come out now, but at the time, a lot of people didn't know him and Art Pollard were really tight. And you're talking about in the early 70s, 1971, 72, 73. Art Pollard at that time was probably in his mid 40s. He passed away. He was killed at Indy in 73 when he was 46. And they were really, they just hit it off, whether it was playing, put the poker games, playing basketball. Art liked to play basketball to keep in shape in that. And Robin wanted to do some racing, and Art sold him. He talked Andy Granatelli into selling Robin this McNamara Formula Ford car. Jacques Drising posted a shot of it on Facebook today, and Robin tells us the story. It's recorded. It's somewhere in the ether sphere. The story. It's hilarious. But he only drove it twice. He drove it at IRP to do the test, and he was totally unprepared for that. I think he forgot his helmet or something, and Art had to run around, or they didn't have gas for it or something. And then he took it to an SCCA race at Watkins Glen, and Robin qualified well, and I don't know if they inverted or what, but he ended up on the first row, and he was leading this thing. He says he goes into turn one, he's leading, he goes into, he does the lap, and then second lap, by the second lap he goes eyes, he had his eyes on Formula One, because he's like, if I'm leading in my first Formula Ford race, what can stop me? And he either lost the brakes or somebody crashed the car, totaled his car the next lap, and that was it. But the story that was just hilarious, and then also the buying the midget from the Bettenhausens, going USAC midget racing, and the story about the HUD 100 we qualified in the top 10 is just it's good stuff. And then also the other thing was brought up, the Indiana State Fair. He loved Indianapolis and
Hmm.
Indiana, and bringing a lot of the drivers, whether it was Tony Kanaan or whoever, Marcus Erickson, I think a couple of years ago, and these drivers.
Hinch, yeah,
Yeah,
Connor Daly. I think
people,
he brought a Wishing out there once. So
yeah,
it's like
people who weren't exposed to that atmosphere and bringing them in and really showing them real Americana at its best.
I guarantee if he would have been in if the health would have been there, him and Grosjean or him and McLaughlin this year would have been a riot. And
Mhm.
that's something where look at how much Grosjean's embraced America this year, and that's actually to that end, guys that have known him for years and guys that have only known him for this year or maybe 6 7 months, the outpouring is equal across the board. It's like it doesn't matter if you're a rookie or somebody that's been in this series 20 25 years. I mean, there is no question how many people have offered tributes in some way, shape, or form. I mean, it's rare you get that kind of unanimity within the paddock, but that's something where it clearly sticks out.
Yeah, and also a lot of people didn't realize his basketball background with the Indiana
Yeah, no.
Pacers. And listening, I had an opportunity to be around with Tim Coffeen, who I didn't know at the time knew a lot about basketball, but Bill Marvel, who actually worked for the Pacers for a while, and those guys talk about the ABA because that's one of my little hidden things I love is the old American Basketball Association. The stories about it and that are just awesome, and hearing those guys tell stories about the old ABA and the Pacers was just priceless. A lot of fun.
Yeah, just the Indiana portions, basketball. I guess he went after Bob Knight at one point. I mean, the Pacer stuff, the game. I mean, there's, you'd hear him on JMV or something a few years ago, and maybe 30% would be
Yeah.
racing talking, and the
Yep.
other bit would be gambling or just well, that's that guy cost me that much money, and it's just it's going off on that. So
Yeah, the other thing was Do you remember his girlfriend we had for a while?
No.
The Asian girl?
I've I
It had
I've
he had
I've
a
heard stories. Details might be sketchy.
yeah, he had a hilarious voicemail where she was on the voice. She was the voicemail, and with the whips and everything in the background. So I can just picture somebody, just somebody who doesn't really know Robin that well, hearing this voicemail. It just would have been hilarious.
Oh, the
And their
practical
reaction.
joke, the jokes and the pranks and just the anger, the sheer anger he'd have at his keyboard when he either spilled something or
Yes.
the Pepsi goes wrong or he types something out of, and you just you just hear him in the keyboard in the middle of like
Chewing on his fingers.
just chewing on it's a random it's a random Friday practice session or something, and it's just it just going off.
Yeah, and I was like, I remember I'm like, geez, Robin, just settle down on those fingers. They're gonna be nothing but bloody nubs. But when you read his, and some people were a little critical of his writing early on, but I thought, uh, I guess you could say it improved. But I mean, some of the columns he's come out in over the last 10 years were just, I was jealous of how good they were because I don't think I could ever write as well as he did in certain
Oh, the
situations.
I look at the frequency. I mean, it's it's a bit tough to say it, but like you never wanted to read an obit, but you always wanted to read a Robin written obit because like there was he had a way of bringing everybody that you didn't know to light in both in written word and obviously his TV stuff. I mean, we haven't even touched on the TV stuff really, but um, some of the poignancy stuff. I mean, the Jenkins one he was able to do a few weeks ago, it's a shame that that's what it sounded like, but you're kind
Mhm.
of glad that he was still able to do it, if that makes sense. But then you
Yes.
hear like a Justin Wilson tribute, which I mean, that was another anniversary that just occurred recently, 6 years. And you think about how much Robin was able to give back that way. So it's like almost kind of a paradox where it's like you could be cursing at one point, cursing, gambling at one thing, or writing just this awesome thing or being super generous. I mean, it's like, and it was all of those in one fell swoop.
And I guess one of the big pluses for him, and for those who maybe only been following the sport for the last maybe 10 years or so, don't
Mhm.
realize at one time he was probably the most hated man in open wheel racing. I
And
mean, there
and
was
in
a civil,
and the state of Indiana
yeah,
probably too.
and when the Civil War, I mean, people don't realize the how ugly it was getting circa 1995, 96, 97, and it was an ugly place to be. It was frustrating, especially somebody like me who at the time I was pro IRL at the time. It's just it didn't the execution of it didn't go as way as it should have. I understood what they were trying to do, and eventually, an interesting point of view, especially for working at the mile, because we had both sanctioning bodies.
Right.
Races were
It's a
for
good
both,
point.
so we could see both sides of it, and it was certainly frustrating. But I think Uncle Bobby kind of said it best, where he said, there's blood on both from both sides. He had his opinions and he stuck to his guns. He was not for it. And to be honest, I thought maybe his criticism was a bit too sharp. I think overall wasn't good for racing. He had his opinion, he was going to voice it. You never had to guess where he was standing. He wasn't going to, mishmash it or sugarcoat it. He just tell you what he thought.
Indeed, and I think that the fact he was able to cover as painful as that period was and then bring it kind of full circle both with the unification back in '08 and then when Penske took over the speedway and took over the series and took over IMSP back in 19, you know Steve, my friend Steve Whittick from Trackside Online, we both know Steve well. He had a great tweet today that says Robin's the only guy that could chew out Roger Penske wearing like a cut off t-shirt or like cartoon t-shirt and sweatpants and be taken seriously.
Mhm.
And that's a perfect way to describe it because it's like no other person could have grown to a stature where they could get away with the attire being what it was but also have the point of view and understanding of history so much. I mean, going back to Oreo too, I think Oreo mentioned in his column today that Robin wrote the foreword for his book,
Mhm.
which that's an important testament. I mean, I think it's going to be one of the great shames that we don't have a Robin book. um I hate that he never was able to write one, but I hope that somebody down the line can gather either tributes or some way to keep things alive that you've seen digitally.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially about with Penske, and then plus he had the ear of Randy Bernard,
Yeah.
and was able to. I think what the most important thing about that was he was able to give, because it sounds kind of silly. Well, he's a fan's point of view, but he understood what the rank and file of the IndyCar fan wanted, and the open wheel fans, and he understood. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't want to call it animosity, but I guess you could, between the USAC crowd that goes to Winchester, Kokomo, and Gas City, and who goes to, the Speedway, and maybe comes up to, another track, Mid Ohio or somewhere. I mean,
Well,
those are two different breeds of people.
yeah, I mean, he's probably directly responsible for getting Brian Clausen in the Indy 500, 3, 4 times that he was able to do it before his unfortunate, passing, gosh, 5 years ago already. Um, but yeah, no, actually, to that Randy point, Robin Robin's influence was such that he was more than a journalist, but less than a super fan, if that makes sense. Like he was
Mhm.
both, because like you think of super fans and you're not always having the best perception of them because you think they might be a little too formal. But he was like I don't even know if that's a word, but but Robin had a way to capture, and I think the mailbag is a perfect embodiment of that, because even though the mailbag kind of, I don't want to say become a running joke, but it was definitely something where there were the tropes and where there were the inside jokes every week of, it's like Milwaukee, Michigan, Cleveland, Phoenix, some combination of those. And when are we going to get, Larson in the field? It's like, frankly, if Larson's in the 2022 Indy 500, that's going to be like a final, like Robin shot that he
Mhm.
called, and I think there's a very good chance that happens now, depending on how silly season, engine shakeouts, and car count does. But that's pretty cool to think that you could have that amount of influence when you're just putting words together.
Well, and I think NASCAR and IndyCar are finally realizing that the strength of both of them together is much
Yep.
better than them separate. And I'm not saying they need to merge or anything like that. I'm just saying they need to embrace each other and try and promote each other, because both you and I
Mhm.
both realized, you especially with being in the younger crowd and that, there's not a lot of people involved in auto racing at your age.
100%. And I almost kind of felt like, and we both know that I don't do this full time, but it's still a point where it's like I love it and I care even if I'm not directly living it day to day. My time that I spent full time in the IndyCar Media Corps for that, 6, 7 year period from 2011 to call it, mid 18, that was a time where I felt like it was important for me to be there because I didn't want the 40, 50 somethings to be the youngest people in there. I want,
Mhm.
and Robin did too. And I think that's kind of where the special kinship that he and I had was, because it was like, yeah, you're young. Yeah, you're not, you don't have 50, 60 years experience or whatever. And that's good. Like, so I like that his preseason column this year, where he was kind of like, here's who's going to happen and the young kids are going to do it. He's banged the drum for those guys for a while. The Pato Awards, the Colton Hertas, Renus, Askew, Piggott, on down the line. And that's important, because that was always the thing that I kind of like specializing in, was covering road to Indy guys before they got to IndyCar. That was like my favorite part of it. And Robin definitely got to that point. And I'd like to think that some of what I did, I mean, I don't want to put myself on the pedestal, but I'd like to think of, writing about those guys helped him have a better sense of the young kids as they came in for that reason.
Yeah, that's a good point. One other thing I wanted to mention was, when IMS started the Robin Miller Media Award,
Hmm.
and it was so impressive. Not only that Mark Miles and the whole group did that, but also the people that supported it. AJ, Mario, Johnny Rutherford, Bobby Unser was there, Paul Page, and you could really see the genuine affection between Robin and AJ, who notoriously, almost 40 years ago
40 years ago, yeah.
got into a fight about what Robin was writing, which he was right. Where AJ didn't want it to get out, so it's neat that he was able to then, especially with the Motorsports Hall of Fame, that I'm glad they sped that up and gave it to him a couple weeks ago, because that's supposed to occur at the end of September. So I'm glad that he was able to see that. Seeing that is pretty. Yeah, this guy knew his shit.
He did, and one of the things that I'm also really happy that I got to see and that he got to see was that he got another four-time winner. That Elio, the poignancy of Elio winning this year's 500, I think is going to resonate for a long time for a lot of reasons. And you think about it, that's going to be Robin's last 500. That's Bob Jenkins' last 500. That is something where you had a generation of fans hasn't seen that ever. I mean, I'm in that ballpark. I mean, I was not even two yet when Rick Mears won in '91, and I was negative years for the previous ones. So do the math on that. But that just that Robin had one more chance to do a four-timer column, which is something that again we wouldn't have had to see going back, that time. I mean, it's been building for 12 years in between the gap, and I was so glad that he got that. And you know the columns were definitely fewer this year, but the ones that did come out had an extra special punch
Yes,
as a result.
the Elio thing is really cool, because I was one that kind of didn't want him to. I wanted to just keep that club, that exclusive. And I thought, oh, he's a new guy and that. But I had Elio had the opportunity to interview him. Actually, he was our first driver interview
I
on
remember
the
seeing that,
channel.
yeah.
And I asked him, I said, and Michael Shank, one of our favorite people too. I said, did he bring you in to kind of show the team how to win? And he said, yeah, I think so. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, he wins this fourth Indy 500, first win for Michael Shank Racing in Indy, in the IndyCar series. And you think about it, it made such sense after the fact.
It's a good point, and I think, man, it's just the I keep coming back to the word poignancy, and I think to that four timers point, I think the fact Elio's now won it as a four timer at 46 rather than at 34, 35, I think gives him a little more
Yes.
gravitas within
I think
that
so.
that realm. And so they would have had a four timer, and then they had the picture and whatnot. So Robin's understanding of history is so good. His appreciation of future is good. The banter is good. I mean, there was just I don't think there's anyone, and obviously it's not a huge media contingent that's still covers IndyCar regularly, and everyone's kind of got their own little, cachet or their little
Mhm.
style or what they do. But we were all kind of looking up to him as a way of what of Robin can we do in our methodologies, I guess is how.
Mhm.
But not have certain volume up too high or be loud at keyboards and cursing angrily. Maybe you can. Maybe that's a tribute. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, that's a good point, because when he came into the media center, you knew it, and I don't want to say he had an entourage, but he would draw attention, and not because he wanted it, but because he was that kind of person, and he was the, I don't want to say the cool guy in the class, but I mean he was a guy, if you wanted, once he started to talk or something, you would find out something.
Oh, it's a shut up and learn type thing. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
you don't have a 6 hour practice. And again, I'm so glad I did those 2 or 3 years of doing the full month of May in 16, 17, 18, because it's those random Tuesday, Wednesdays where it's like it was that small group where that's where the stories got told, because no
Mhm.
one's going to be paying attention to on track testing with only 33 cars for 6 hours. So it's like he'll throw like if Donald Davidson was like an actual stat interact, Robin would bring the stats but then add a humorous line to it or something about like, well, this guy threw his wrench out as this was happening, or this is when AJ almost hit me upside the head, or our latest conversation about that. So yeah.
And then also the stories that didn't get into certain books and whatnot. So those are always
No, that would be a much bigger book.
yeah. There's a lot of those I heard. So one final thing I wanted to mention. That was I think 3 years ago. Remember when him and AJ did the little thing in the Indianapolis Motor
Yes.
Speedway Museum on the
Yep.
golf cart, and so supposedly that was 90 minutes, I think, and they were running film the whole time. NBC needs to, however they do it, needs to release that, even if it's just
I'll
on
put it on Peacock. I mean, for goodness sake,
something.
it's like
Yeah,
you have
exactly.
streaming platforms now. It's like, especially now that they've got the TV deal re-signed for another couple of years. I
Yeah,
mean, now there's not an issue of holding it back for whatever reason. So
that really needs to be released because I mean, we saw only what 5-10 minutes of it, and it was gold, and I'm sure the rest of it too. I mean, whenever you got to see AJ kind of unfiltered, there. I always said when you interview AJ, there's two AJs. There's a filtered AJ and unfiltered AJ. And the first couple times you may interview him, you get the filtered AJ, or there's good AJ, bad AJ interviews. I've had the opportunity to do both, and bad AJ interviews is tough. You got to really start digging and try and get a quote or something, and sometimes you won't. And but I've had other opportunities with AJ where you do, and with Robin, of course, he had his ups and downs with AJ, and that video. If I could count on one hand what kind of things I'd like to see that are unearthed and need to be unearthed, that is certainly one of them.
yeah, no, 100%. And I think there has to be enough, not just with AJ, but many of the other interviews. I mean, and I look back and actually to Racer's credit, I would never really watch those Tough Guy series when they came out.
Hmm.
Not because I didn't want to, but just didn't really feel quite the same connection. Because I mean, again, I'm the stereotypical young person, but now it's like I'm so glad those are all archived on Racer's website, YouTube, or wherever, to be like, okay, so there's now you can go back to those. It's living history in a sense. So I don't know where the next generation of record keeping and storytelling for this generation, future generations comes from. You know, is it me? I don't know. I mean, will I be a nerd about this stuff? Probably, but I'm not going to be at the level of no one's going to be at that level. It's not a replaceable person.
No, if you look at, I mean, Robin and Donald Davidson is getting up there in years. Those are guys, and it's the same thing with Donald. There's public Donald, and then there's private Donald.
Mhm.
And I've had the opportunity to see both of them, and the same thing with Robin. And I think you and I both have been blessed to been able to see both sides of that. We love
Mhm.
both of those sides. They're both wildly entertaining, but most of that I think from us, we love to be that fly in the wall. We're sponges when it comes to information for racing, and
Mhm.
to have that opportunity. I'm just very thankful that Robin did that, and Robin did that with a lot of people. We're not special in any way,
No.
Tony and I, but we've seen it where he's helped a lot of people. He was on my radio show on 1250. Probably a half dozen times. He took out time, but he did that with a lot of people. Been on podcasts and other shows and whatnot because somebody would ask, he would do it. He didn't care.
And he put every bit into each opportunity too, because he wasn't like going to do it and then not give you what you wanted. I mean, I'm so thankful that like there's the Dinner with Racers podcast that he did, where it's like literally within that podcast he got a scoop at the restaurant they were at. I think the Speedway Grill or whatever the place across from Big Woods or
Hmm.
carpenter shop is, and he sees Alan McDonald there. It's just like, what are you doing there? Just like,
Right. Yeah.
and so he's literally just, he's not even trying to break news. And that was actually, I did a column for TSO. Just today I was being distracted and couldn't really focus on what I was getting paid to do. So I was just like, well, you know what, I got to put my words together while they're fresh in my
Yes.
head. And I was just so remembering just that whole thing, like, just where it all goes, and where I was, and where he was, just writing things, and it was just fun to put it all together and reflect on that.
It certainly was. Well, Tony, I certainly appreciate you taking time out, and you know, good guy. We're certainly going to miss Robin, but it also gives us an opportunity to remember about the good times, and we will always remember Robin. And for those of us listening, please do that. Listen, go on YouTube and look up the Tough Guy series, because what's neat about that series that you brought up. I'd forgotten that myself. Was that he brought up a lot of drivers that aren't necessarily in a lot of books that you're going to see. Those are some of the I don't want to call them also rans, but those are guys that didn't win the Indianapolis 500. Guys like Sam Sessions and Lee Kuzman and those guys. Lee Kuzman is a guy who, thanks to Robin, I got to see and sit next to at lunch a few times. Lee Kuzman. This is a guy from Iowa, who, a good-looking young kid. He flips in a sprint car, hits a light pole that blows up, drops down from about 10 feet onto his tail tank, explodes in a ball flame, and is disfigured for the rest of his life. Finally gets his life straightened out, and is rehabbed back, and gets a ride of the not the ride, but a B+ ride with Fletcher Racing. In 1973, is practicing at Ontario, and has a closed head injury that keeps him out of racing for a year. And just, this poor guy battles back, almost wins the kart race at Atlanta, 1979, driving a Parnelli for, I think it was Larry Ham Racing or somebody. But I guess his best finish was a second. But guys like that need to. If you're a race fan, you need to know about Lee Kuzman and some of those guys and the stories, and that's what makes racing interesting. If you're a baseball fan, yeah, Mickey Mantle and Joe DiMaggio and all those guys are great, but you also want to know about some of those other guys that played the game.
Hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm thinking of just, I'm thinking of like the crew guy banter. I mean, I remember there were 2 or 3 years where I could not for the life of me figure out how I was getting beat to every single silly season scoop. Well, actually, I could figure it out. It's like, they'd go to Robin first, and then I'd have to be like, well, as Racer.com's Robin Miller reported, even though he does the pre-race show, does the grid runs. So, oh man, he was funny. He had to fill in one time in the booth. We were at Pocono, and he filled in the booth on the Monday because the race got pushed a day. And PT had to go back to Phoenix for an appointment. Sorry, appointment. And and Robin was just, holding court with Brian Till and Townsend, and I was up there for, the pre-race stuff as we were kind of going, and I'm thinking, this is a guy that like is beating me when he's in the paddock, but he's happy to like help me when I'm sitting back behind here. So it was that, like, how cool is this moment type thing. So the just, yeah, I mean, that's just what I keep coming back to.
Well, that T-shirt does say it all. Hey kid, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
And then the other one you like to say is, hey, I'm just an asshole.
I love this. I love all the sweatshirts. I mean, like the whole Mount Rushmore, the gurney, all the rest. So it's just
And the thing with Dan Gurney too. Dan Gurney is, a lot of people are Indy 500 centric. All they think about is Indy 500, and that's fine. But Robin was also one that wanted to say, hey, Dan Gurney was a hell of a driver, and don't just judge because he didn't win in Indianapolis 500. He wasn't a fantastic driver. But Robin was always good that way, and saying, hey, kid, let me tell you.
yep.
And those are two situations right there. So, all
Yep.
right, Tony, thanks a lot. Appreciate you taking time out, and hopefully we'll have you on the show for a more fun situation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, certainly as we get to the end, I mean, that's one thing I feel bad that Robin's not going to see the IndyCar championship battle play out. But I bet him and Uncle Bobby up there are probably going to be having a hoot just about ripping on drivers, depending on what they do the last 3 races. That's what I'm telling myself.
All right, very good. Well, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, Z.